Well, at ease, paratroopers, and welcome back to the Enduring Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Kidder, and today's guest is someone whose work has profoundly shaped how the military, law enforcement, and leaders across professions understand combat, violence, and the moral weight that comes with bearing arms. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is a retired U.S. Army officer, former West Point psychology professor, and one of the world's leading authorities on the psychology of killing, combat stress, and the warrior's responsibility in society. His groundbreaking research and writing, most notably on killing and on combat, fundamentally changed how we understand what happens to the human mind and soul in moments of extreme violence. His later work, including On Spiritual Combat and the Warrior Mindset, bridges the gap between tactical reality, moral responsibility, and living a life of honor after service. Colonel Grossman has trained and advised military units, law enforcement agencies, educators, and leaders around the world. But at the heart of his work is something deeper, helping warriors and protectors understand what they carry and how to carry it without losing themselves. On a personal note, Colonel Grossman's work was formative for me. I read his books while deployed, not as theory, but as a way to better understand myself, the profession of arms, and the kind of leader I wanted to be in combat and beyond. This is my conversation with Dave Grossman. Let's get into it. All right, Colonel Grossman, thank you for being here. Your work on killing, on combat, and more recently on spiritual combat has shaped how generations of leaders, warriors, and first responders understand the moral and psychological cost of violence. I read On Combat while still in uniform, and I just want to let you know that this conversation matters to me personally, not just professionally, and I'm so grateful to have you on today.
It's my pleasure, Kevin, and it's just Dave, please. And man, I'm excited about you, your journey, your book, the things that you've got bubbling, and the contribution that you have to make. When we did some prep work for this podcast, I've done a fair number of podcasts. I'm tremendously impressed with your thoroughness and depth. I think I promised as well for what the book and your future endeavors are going to turn into. So I think your listeners are in for a good time here. This is going to be a pleasant opportunity and probably unlike any podcast I've done before. This is going to be unique.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, that's fantastic, and I agree. I think this is going to be a great conversation to share with our listeners. Someone who's just experienced both the professional side as a soldier, but then as a professional from the mental aspect, to kind of take a road that we really haven't discussed. And I'm very excited to share that with our listeners today. So normally I start with a story, and as we mentioned before we hit record, we don't have that personal relationship just yet. But I'm a big avid reader. When I was deployed, I would always order books from Amazon. And one of my previous guests, she was my captain, Rachel Breslin. Iraq the second time. We had a down period, and she caught me on the deck reading, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm reading, ma'am." She's like, "What are you reading?" I was like, "Oh, I'm reading On Combat by Colonel Dave Grossman." It was phenomenal. She's like, "You're always reading. You're always trying to, self-improve," and she's a lifelong learner. So it was just cool to have that memory come back recently, and then knowing we would be having this conversation today.
But it's a foundational concept. Sun Tzu, 2,500 years ago. Know yourself, know the enemy. And everybody focuses on know the enemy, but our focus is really on know yourself and what's going to happen to your mind and body in combat and all everything else that comes with it. That's all the intel we do on the enemy. But how can we focus on the other vital half of that equation? And that's a good goal for the day. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I've hit on in the book is the battlefield. The scope of the battlefield changes when you take off the uniform. Your enemy isn't necessarily armed or a military. It can be yourself and your struggle with your identity, your purpose, and connection. And that's really what caused me to write the book and then to start the podcast. Was it's been very cathartic, and I've had friends on, I've had colleagues, leaders who've been able to share messages that resonate. And I think having you on is just another way from just a tremendous resource to help us do that internal battle and come out on top.
Maybe so. And it's like I said, iron sharpens iron.
Absolutely.
It's always a two-way street. My personal journey, starting as a young private in 1974, every step of the way has been this process of finding out from others and interviewing others. Iron sharpens iron, two-way street every step of the way.
Absolutely. And I love that you talked about your private. Before we get into your history, which I definitely want to hear and share, in April, I attended a conference in Los Angeles. And the first breakout session I went to was The Art of Asking Better Questions. It was by Brett Ledbetter, who's a mental performance coach. And at the end, he plugged his new book. I got a chance to speak with him. My kids got me the book for Father's Day because I couldn't stop talking about it. And what he had suggested was, when you meet with clients, a great way to break the ice is just open the book to a page, ask them a question. Don't let them get away with a generic answer. So I've taken that and made it my own for the show. And you're one of the rare ones. Yours is only one part. A lot of these are two or three parts, but your question is great. Um, if life is a great teacher, what are the best lessons it's taught you about disagreements?
All right, lessons about disagreements. I think the foundation of my life lesson is understanding the reality of combat and aggression and violence. And I think the disagreement lies in the things that are not stated.
Mhm.
I wrote a book about hunting, and hunters know if you ask them that you don't hear the shot and your ears don't ring. Now, you are still getting hearing loss, so wear hearing protection when you hunt. But how could we have had 500 years of gunpowder combat and not understand something so simple as auditory exclusion? And so our whole disagreement, if within this realm of human aggression, begins with the magnitude of what we don't know. We think we know all about combat. We've seen the movies, we may have, yeah, maybe we did paintball or airsoft, and the truth is we've completely missed tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, slow motion time, the sympathetic nervous system arousal,
Mhm.
how stimulus will cue that sympathetic arousal later on. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, you've got total fight or flight reaction happening, and that is not PTSD. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes PTSD. That's that whole foundation for disagreement about PTSD and combat and veterans and courage, and it all revolves around this foundation of ignorance and the things that we don't know because we never asked the right questions. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, and I love that you talked about not asking the right questions. Um, what I've struggled with, and some of my friends have struggled with, is conversations that are a mile wide but an inch thick.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when you're in a foxhole in a training environment, or if you're in a Humvee or an airplane or a battleship for hours upon hours with other people, you have the most personal and intimate conversations, and that's why those relationships formed in uniform last forever.
yeah. But
And
you, the funny part, yeah, we think we've got deep relationships, but what I found is how shallow they are. 1975, 76, Sergeant Grossman. I'm 85 in 22 months. It were crazy times. The Army was broken, and we had Vietnam veterans all around us, and we wanted to know what combat was like.
mhm,
And we had those long conversations and long drives and long deployments, and nobody ever talked about tunnel vision, auditory exclusion,
mhm.
slow motion time, memory gaps, memory distortions, re-experience in the event. So what I found out was when we talk about something like combat, it's really a taboo topic. And the best way I can relate it is really, really true. It's a lot like sex. It's very intimate. It's very personal. And if somebody walked up and said, "Hey, Kevin, how's the sex life going on? How often you get going? What do you do?" You're not going to tell them. But
Right.
it's some medical researcher as part of a scholarly study. It was interviewing thousands of people. You might tell them. And so that's what happened. Fast forward 10 years, Captain Grossman, Army Ranger, West Point psychology professor, prior service buck sergeant. I'm asking these questions, and suddenly people will talk about it.
Hmm.
And they said, I'd never told anybody about this before, on killing. Over and over again, people said, never told anybody about this before. And then the early drafts of the book, I would give a copy to the veteran, and the veteran's wife would read it, and she'd say, "Well, is this what it was like for you?" And he said, "Well, let me read the damn book,"
Right.
and then the veteran's wife would make copies of the book, back in the old Xerox days, and they put Xerox copies out to other veterans' wives, and those wives would read it, and they'd ask their husbands, and suddenly they were talking about things that they
Hmm.
never talked about before. So really, the whole realm, we think we've got fellowship, but it's truly, an inch thick, because we're not talking about the deep things. Hey, did you, and that's where what we're doing today is we're doing the debriefing, and how vital that debriefing is, that AAR is, to fill in the memory gaps and to sort out the memory distortions. And to actually say, here's what I saw, here's what I did. And yeah, you wet yourself. It happened. You wet yourself in combat. It happens. I had a guy tell me one time his father was a World War II veteran, crotchety old guy, and he said, "Yeah, I'll read a book about combat when they talk about people crapping themselves." He,
Mm.
he said, "Well, here you go, Dad. Here's the book.
Yeah.
Here's the book." And among traffic accident victims, I tell all
Hmm.
my cops, what ratio of traffic accident victims have messed themselves? And I,
Hmm.
I do a lot of work in hospitals, and the numbers through the roof, and people are devastated, and nobody ever talks about it. So
Right.
you tell them that's your body's natural response. It happens
Hmm.
all the time. Don't worry about it. You can literally save somebody from a lifetime of shame and despair in the ER, or that cop at that traffic, or that paramedic, by saying that's your body's natural response. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. So it is these taboo topics. There's a phrase, we're only as sick as our secrets.
Mm.
And when it comes to combat, we're sick. We're sick, sick, sick,
Hmm.
because it's just this realm of secrets that nobody talks about. And now we've cracked it open. I call it warrior science. And I'm writing a kind of a science fiction fantasy series that actually, just like science fiction takes science and applies to fiction, we're taking warrior science and applying it to fiction.
Wow.
So that phrase is really powerful, and we spend years with people, but did we ever talk about re-experience in the event? Did we ever talk about not hearing the shots? Did we ever
Hmm.
talk about something that triggers the memory, and how you brought that under control? And that's one of the defining challenges of our age, is a generation that's never experienced trauma.
Hmm.
And so when the World War II generation said, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger."
Right.
And they believed it, and they knew it. And this generation says, "Oh, I'm broken. I have PTSD." And there's no other option on the menu that says post-traumatic growth.
Hmm.
It's all they got. I'm broken. And nobody ever told them, no, no, no. And so this physiological arousal that you feel, your heart is pounding, and we talked about it at West Point psych professors. What the musician, that this lady says, "Oh, my stomach is churning and my heart is pounding, and I'm sick to my stomach, and every time I get on stage, I don't think I can do it anymore." Well, and then we got the guy says, the rock star says, "Man, my guts are turning and my heart's pounding.
Hmm.
And every time I get on stage, I love it. And I don't ever want to stop doing it." And so two different people are having the exact same physiological arousal, and they're processing it totally differently. So that's at the heart of what I want the world to know. I want the world to be deeply and profoundly curious about what's actually happening in this realm of human aggression, because the exact same things are happening in violent crime.
Hmm.
And violent crime is exploding to levels never seen before. And the exact same thing we can learn on the battlefield, and that you have to give in your book, and I have to give in my book, also have got tremendous applications to the overall human condition anytime you face another human being trying to hurt you.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things that just triggered while you were talking. I One thing I want from my book is for the spouse or the friend or the family member to see it and want to read it and understand their service member better.
Yes,
Because
yes,
it's not in the level of depth or scope that you go into, but it is something that I consider a mirror and a map based on my experiences to help others in that same foxhole. Um, I love that you said we're not curious. My favorite TV show is Ted Lasso, and he has a line, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I think when you said we don't touch the taboo topics, that's kind of being judgmental. We don't want to possibly offend someone, but we're not curious enough to ask the questions. And I had the privilege of going through the Army's personnel recovery course, which was based on recovering POWs from Vietnam and the debriefing process. And one of the ways they were able to recover was getting to tell the story without it being emotional. The first time they tell the story, it's going to be hours, maybe even days, because of physiological response. They're crying. You need to take breaks. But eventually they tell the story where they own the story and the story doesn't own them anymore.
yes, yes. That's the path to healing. How did it turn out that you had that opportunity to do that debriefing? How
I
did
was lucky enough to be in the 101st Airborne Division. I was a Currahee. And I was working in battalion operations, and we'd just come back from Afghanistan. We knew we were probably slated to go again, and it was a course that was provided. And I was the right guy, right time, lucky enough to get to go with my operations officer and my operations sergeant, and it was a 5 day phenomenal course. Most of the people we were with were pilots. They were with SOAR, the Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And, they're operating behind enemy lines and doing some really cool, dangerous stuff.
yeah,
Um, but being in the 101st had its perks. You get an opportunity to take a class like that, and you don't pass it up.
yeah. Wow.
Um, if you don't mind, you mentioned you were a private buck sergeant at West Point. Can you take us, back to early days? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah,
What led you to join the military?
yeah. Well, I was born in Germany. My dad was in the army. He was an MP, and uh, kind of got chopped to the CIA and was
Mm,
just operating safe houses I was born in 1956, so he was there in 55, 56, 57. And, then he came home and he was a cop and he ended up going to nuke security and we moved around a lot. Uh, the Minuteman missile program,
hmm.
North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, which is Minuteman 1, Minuteman 2. He retired 30 years later as chief of security, worked his way up through the ranks.
Wow.
I enlisted I actually, my senior year, I was done with high school and had nothing to do in the second semester. So it was 1974, January, February, March. I lied about my age and worked in a wildcat oil rig in the panhandle of Nebraska.
Wow.
So I was working 17 years old, working 12-hour days, 7 days a week on an open rig in the winter in Nebraska. And but it was just it was I was working a man's life. I was
Yeah.
doing what I wanted to do it, and was exhausted and pushing the envelope. And those guys couldn't spell OSHA, let alone
Mhm.
comply with it. I mean, it was the closest I've come to death over and over again. It was just bizarre how dangerous those rigs were. And so I turned 18 in August, and I became a paratrooper and infinitely safer. And I just all my life I'd wanted to be a soldier. In first grade icebreaker, teacher said, "What do you give you to grow up?" I'm going to be a soldier. That's all I wanted to do it. And I was a paratrooper, 82nd Airborne Division. It was bad times.
Mhm.
The druggies ran the barracks. The recruiting was in the pits. But I was really influenced by Robert Heinlein, and particularly a book called Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
It's one of only two books on the FORSCOM officers' recommended reading books that were science fiction back in the day. And it tracked a guy who went to OCS. He
Mhm.
was a kind of a paratrooper, and then he went to OCS, and I'd always had that in my mind that I'm going to go to OCS. I was married to my high school sweetheart, and I wanted to do better for her and better for my family, and it went real well for me. I went to OCS, infantry, ranger school. I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and just to give you an idea of how crazy bad it was. Um, it was uh, it was 19 uh, 1979, 1980. And we were in the Ninth Infantry Division of Fort Lewis, Washington.
Mhm.
Out of every infantry company, one platoon was zeroed out because it just recruiting was so bad. Of the remaining two platoons, each platoon had one squad zeroed out. So an infantry company was four squads, and those squads were never full strength.
Mhm.
And the weapons platoon was supposed to be kept up to strength, but it never was.
Mhm.
So an infantry company was four understrength squads. And
Wow.
that's how bad recruiting was. And that's how bad the army was. It was just and I had more drug busts than every other officer in the battalion put together. Because when I was on staff duty, I went hunting the druggies.
Mm.
I was in the barracks. I knew that drug dealers, if you lived in the barracks and you didn't want to do drugs, you had to fight. God,
Mm.
just do a little dope, do a little this, and you're cool. And the drug dealers ran the barracks, and it was out of control. It was broken, and the good soldiers got the hell out of there and didn't want anything to do with it. And the bad soldiers weren't going to reenlist. Well, Ronald Reagan became president, and it was the single most astounding thing I've ever seen in my lifetime. We had the urinalysis program. We got rid of the druggies. We would have counseling statements in Article 15s an inch thick, and we
Wow.
couldn't get rid of them because the military was a form of social mobility.
Mm.
These people have been repressed by society, and it was our job to give them opportunity. And we had the expeditious discharge program. We got rid of the dead weight. We got rid of the drug users, and millions of great young Americans enlisted. And it's really very similar to what's happening right now with the
Yeah.
Trump administration and all of the great kids that are enlisting now. And I don't think we were nearly as broken as we were. People don't understand how incredibly bad it was. I was in the 82nd Airborne as an enlisted man, so the 82nd they tried to keep it full, but it was a disaster. If you go anywhere else in the army, it was just broken. And then boom, it turned around in a year. The most phenomenal thing I've ever seen. It turned around in a year. So I did all the great jobs you'd want to do as a young lieutenant, XO, weapons platoon leader, infantry company, infantry platoon leader. They found out I had been enlisted. I was Radar O'Reilly.
Mm.
Yeah, I was snagged and put in the orderly room fairly early on. I was freaking Radar O'Reilly. And they put me in the battalion S1 in another battalion that was broken. So I was the guy running personnel, and it was
Mhm.
the last two S1s had been fired. Except for Ranger School, it was the hardest thing I ever did in my
Oh, I
career,
bet.
but I got it turned around because I've been there. I was Radar O'Reilly. Imagine Radar O'Reilly is suddenly made a captain and put in charge of the and so then I went off to infantry officer advanced school, and the army gave me 2 months or 2 years to finish my bachelor's degree, and that was the key. All I'd ever done. I was 17 years old, lied about my age, working 12-hour shifts 7 days a week. I joined the army. I beat my head against a big green wall every day, and all of a sudden I had 18 months as a very young captain to go to college. So I'd done night school. I'd done college
Mhm.
and night school. And I had a wife and kids, and I was doing night school and testing out a lot. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I had nothing to do but go to college and work out and have a life. And I thought, whoa, I want more of this.
Yeah.
I want to go to the army. I want to go to school on the army's time. So
Hmm.
I did a really good job getting my bachelor's degree, just a really, really good grade point average, and because my goal was to get more. And then I went off to Fort Lewis, Washington, Infantry Company Command, division staff, and a wonderful time, and got selected to teach at West Point, to teach
Wow.
psychology. I thought psychology. I don't want no stinking psychology. I'm a military historian. I'm an Army Ranger. I'm a VDI killer. But so I said, if I'm going to study psychology, I'll study the psychology of killing.
Mm.
And this question I ask, we'd ask these Vietnam veterans, and they wouldn't say, what's combat going to be like? Then they started answering those questions. And here's the key, Kevin. You'll see this when you start asking these questions and you start getting this information. There is a burden,
Mm.
a moral burden that's created when you start getting this information. And you say, people have entrusted this to me. Now I've got a responsibility to make it available, to write that book. People, this burden of all this information that's in your head that you got to get out. It's like being pregnant with an elephant.
Wow.
And so I wrote my first book on killing, and I thought what was at the core of combat was the act of killing.
Hmm.
And as it zoomed out, I realized that for those who fully prepared themselves, killing's just not that big a deal.
Hmm.
Remember, the vast, vast majority do not get PTSD. The vast, vast majority did not commit suicide. The vast, vast majority have post-traumatic growth. The vast, vast majority of our veterans are a new greatest generation. And the ones who do have problems, we can help. And we're really, really good at treating PTSD, and they come out the other end with post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
And that's that debriefing program that you had that gave you
Yeah.
that opportunity to make peace with the memory. And so you own the memory, and the memory doesn't own you. And all of that was my second book on combat, and
Hmm.
then took it another step with on spiritual combat. And I've got 16 books in print, a lot of good co-authors out there. I have 17. We wrote Bulletproof Marriage, which is really,
Hmm.
really done well. And then,
Phenomenal.
honest, thank you. And the sequel to that coming out in the spring is Bulletproof Family.
Wow.
And it starts with your family contract and family covenant and you go from there. The thing about bulletproof marriage is understanding that you and your wife are one team, and you don't score points on your own team. You don't score points. That's so important. This is not you versus your wife. You and your wife are on the same team. It's you and your wife versus the world. And if you're a cop or a soldier, you're going to retire, but the wife is still going to be there. Your
Hmm.
spouse is for life. Your spouse is more important than the job. Your spouse is more important than because your spouse is going to be there for life, and your children will be there for life, and the spouse will always be the mother of your children. And so realizing that we're on the same team and that we don't score points on each other, that's really important. And so when you take that to the bulletproof family, I wish I had known that. I grew up with a total of 5 kids, and we were always scoring points off each other, and we were teasing, and it was not right. I could have
Right.
been a so much better brother.
Hmm.
My little brothers and my little sister. I could have been a so much better person if we'd have had bulletproof family, and if we'd have had a family covenant that says we're all on the same team, and we're all here to support each other and to help each other, not to score points on each other.
I
And
love
and
that.
and so that's my next step coming up is that my next book, my wonderful, wonderful co-author, Adam Davis, gets all the credit. You should interview Adam. You should have him on. I think
Absolutely. Thank
your
you.
time very well spent. And so that's kind of my life story. I retired. I went to the British staff at West Point, psych professor. It was incredible. You truly cannot learn a field until you teach it.
Hmm.
Truly don't master anything until you teach it. And then the British Staff College, and then ran a ROTC program at Arkansas State. To still be there if they let me. I had so much fun.
Wow.
Retired, and then uh, the grandchildren left and went to St. Louis area, and my wife said, "We're stalking the grandchildren. We're moving to St. Louis." I'm like, Roger out. All I need is an airport. So
Right.
now the grandkids are grown up. My grandson just got back from his first combat tour, and the
Wow.
grandkids are grown up and left, and we're still here. And that's the story. I retired 27 years ago. I'm still on the road 100 days a year or more, and I want to do more,
Yeah.
and keep going it. I'm 69 years old in ridiculously good health, and my goal is to keep teaching and presenting and writing for at least another 20 years. Willie Nelson is 92 years old and
Yep.
on tour. That's who I want to be when I grow up. So
I love that.
yeah,
I
that's
love that. My
that's
mother-in-law runs a boutique financial a wealth management group, and she just turned 70. Same thing. She's like, I don't see myself being done with this. I love that mentality. Yeah, it's funny that we have some commonalities. I was stationed in Stuttgart, Germany. I retired as an MP. I did all 20 years as an MP. Um, my first duty station was Fort Lewis, and my last duty station was Fort Bragg. So I got to close out my chapter as a paratrooper, which is just the
cool.
greatest thing.
Oh, it is. It is. It's glorious.
Um, I totally forgot about Bulletproof Marriage. That is a staple with my wife and I. I don't remember the name of the book, but we use those principles, especially in the seasons of struggle we've had, where I've left a job or searching for a new job, or taking on this endeavor of writing a book and running a podcast where it's me and you versus the problem, not me versus you. And that's just something we really hold on to and pray about. And I couldn't have asked for a better person in my life. And it's the most important decision outside of following Jesus Christ, but the person you choose to marry,
Yes.
that's determines how your life's going to be.
Here we are now. We just had our 50th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah. My wife has some health issues, and it calls on me to be patient and to be loving and to try to, while I'm here, she still supports me traveling. I have a couple of wonderful people working in the office who help, keep things going and help take care of her. But you continue to try to stay focused on supporting each other in their need. And so I'm doing good, and she's not quite so good, and so just being kind and patient with her. The two things we should pray for every day is pray for more faith.
Mm,
I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. If you believe with your heart and confess with your mouth, you shall be saved. But belief is an ongoing, growing process, and we
mhm.
should pray for more faith and pray for more love. Our mission is to love God and love people. Jesus said,
Absolutely.
"A new commandment I give you, to love one another as I have loved you." And so we should ask for more love. The two things we should pay for every day is more faith and more love, and on a pretty steady basis, I say, "Oh, Lord, give me more faith, give me more love," and I bite my tongue, and we drive on, and it turns out really good every time, and so it's not easy.
No,
After 50 years, in some ways, it can become harder when physical things interfere, but it's a daily dedication. When you ask my wife, "How do we do it?" She said, "Jesus." She'll just tell you one word. How do you do it 50 years? Jesus, and that's really the answer.
I love that. The other side of that coin is much of what you've studied, um, the reality of violence and what people don't understand. And you've said that killing is not instinctive for most people. Why do you think it's so hard for society to accept that?
Yeah, and that's something. When we now, first off, medical technology is holding down the murder rate.
Hmm.
So every year we lie to ourselves. It's like year after year we talk about the murder rate. It's like talking about minimum wage and never once allowing for inflation. It's bizarre. Just like we have inflation adjusted dollars, we need medically adjusted murders. I want to
Hmm.
I want to create this critical mass of people that every time they hear the murder rate, they throw down the BS flag. They say the murder rate underrepresents it. The docs
Hmm.
are saying tourniquets alone. Everybody has tourniquets now. Yeah, like on the battlefield, right? Tourniquets alone have cut the murder rate to a quarter would otherwise be. Just that one factor. But setting that aside, on any average day in America, we have little less than between 30 and 50 murders a day.
Hmm.
30 to 50 murders a day in a nation of a third of a billion people. That comes out to about one out of every 10 million people. I
Hmm.
mean, a city of 10 million people, one person will commit a murder. Now that's not an aberration. That is a minuscule, remote. tiny aberration. And divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents in a lifetime of provocation. On any given day across a nation of a third of a billion people, about 1 in 10 million, out of every 10 million people, one will actually take a human life. And so why? Why? And there's this whole array of physiological, psychological, spiritual factors. And people, they watch war movies, they watch murder movies, and they have this most twisted misrepresentation of the reality of violence.
Hmm.
That violence is at tremendous levels, and assault is at horrendous levels, and murder is spiked, but is still profoundly rare. And so people don't want to accept that. And then we say, okay, we're going to go to war. You can kill those guys. It's cool. And think they're going to do that.
Right.
And we found out in World War II, no, they're not going to do that. I've got a piece I just got. It was in the middle of the Korean War in Collier's magazine about why half of all our soldiers won't shoot.
Hmm.
And it's real. It's real. And it talked about how they've been raised by, under virtuous, godly, lawful, and you can't suddenly tell these people, okay, now go kill people, and expect them to do it.
Hmm.
And so we overcame that with training, and by Vietnam we got the firing rate up to 95%, and by the GWAT with simulators, we got the accuracy rate and the firing rate up to levels never seen before. It is an exponential increase in performance on the battlefield beyond anything we've ever seen before. Throughout history, most of the killing was done with artillery,
Right.
and most of the killing was done at long range. The idea that the individual rifleman is just boom, 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 hammering the bad guy. Well, up until recent history, that's not true.
Right.
But what we've done to a certain degree, and this is one of the points of my book on killing, is we kind of tricked people into killing. We've overcome that innate resistance, and at most healthy members of most species in their territorial and mating battles, they won't kill each other. Animals with antlers and horns, they fight head to head. Any
Hmm.
other species, they go to the side, they gut, they gore. Piranha are basically just teeth with fins attached. And they'll, and they'll sink their teeth into anything that hits the water except other piranha. And they fight
Hmm.
each other with flicks of the tails. Rattlesnakes will sink the fangs into anything except another rattlesnake, and lawyers, the professional courtesy. Just joking. All you lawyers out there, we're just kidding. But most healthy members of most species have this resistance, and so do we.
Hmm.
And cold-blooded killing, poisoning somebody, easy. Dropping bombs from 30,000 feet, easy. Firing artillery 2 miles back, easy. Looking somebody in the eyes, recognizing their humanity, and snuffing their life out,
Hmm.
hard, hard. And so we've overcome that resistance, but we've got an obligation now to don't cop a pity party here. We still have a new greatest generation coming out of the process. But we've got two things. And number one is to allow them to live with what they've been trained to do.
Hmm.
And number two is to make sure that the returning veteran is not going to come home and use their skills on their own people. And they're not. The returning veteran of every war has been far less likely to commit violent crime than a non-veteran of the
Hmm.
same age and same sex. And the safeguard is discipline, 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 discipline. The returning veteran is orders of magnitude less likely to be a threat to their society. And there's a good reason for that. And that's the discipline, the haircuts, and the uniforms are all there for a reason. That's the safeguard. If you can't submit your will to authority about goofy little things like how you wear your hair, like some
Hmm.
flaky freaking fashion model, then give up. Give up on submitting your will to authority about important things, like being the best killer the world has ever seen and never, ever using that skill. Now think about that. World War II, the engineers and the logisticians, the leads, they used their skills. They came on use their skills,
Right.
but the killers did not come home and use those skills.
Hmm.
And that brings us back around to that resistance to killing. and understanding that it lies at the heart of who we are. And as a species, we're pretty good at killing each other off.
Hmm.
We don't have the ability to fly, and so we overcame that limitation. We don't have the ability to kill very easily, and so we've got this long history of process to overcome that limitation. But we keep coming back to the default position of most people just don't kill people, and that's a nice thing to know.
Absolutely. When I've experienced this with people know I'm a veteran. If I'm in a workplace, especially in a corporate type environment, if I have a bad day, if I'm visibly grumpy, there's a standoffishness, and I know other people experience it. I wonder if you could maybe touch on the thought process of those that aren't me, maybe weren't in the military, and why they would be so hesitant or nervous when a former military member is having a bad day. I'm under the contention that they think I'm just going to fly out the handle and go postal, which is, like you said, not statistically true. And that's not who I am. I'm a human being. I'm going to have bad days, but I'm not going to take it out on anybody else. I'm
Wow.
probably really going to berate
Well,
myself internally.
this is really kind of new for me. This is a little bit of an angle on something different, and I've got a lot of models and metaphors, and my most successful metaphor, my successful model is the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog. I actually have the U.S. government trademark for the term sheepdog. I wrote the Sheepdog Kids,
Hmm.
and I think what you're defining there is not so much the veteran as the sheepdog. And the fact that they know that this is a person with fangs and that this is a person with capacity for action. And that's the sheepdog. I wrote the book on hunting,
Hmm.
and throughout the history of our species, we've been in the middle of the food chain. There's things that hunted us and things that we hunted, but it's no fun to be hunted. We're never truly happy when we're being hunted. We want to be the hunter.
Hmm.
But so much of society is not about whether or not you hunt. It's about whether or not you've chosen to be the sheepdog. About do you, when it's lawful and legal, do you carry a gun or do you carry a blade? Are you alert? Do you sit, when everybody sits down, somebody has their back to the wall. Why shouldn't it be you? It's the decision to do the things, do you carry pepper spray? It's the decision to control your destiny. It's the decision to take charge of your life. The predator and the prey, the hunter and the hunted. The hunted are never truly at rest. The hunted are never truly victorious. They live their life in fear. And so much of our society has chosen to be the hunted. We live in a nation where we have the ability beyond any other nation on the planet. I tell people, when we pray, I tell my teams to pray with your head up and your eyes open. I've done nothing in the Bible says you got to close your eyes when you pray. And I tell them, look, I've had the honor to train the Secret Service. When the president's got his head bowed in prayer, do you suppose the Secret Service closes their eyes? No. I said, well, I am my family's Secret Service. I am blessed to live in a land where my family can have the same protection the president has,
Hmm.
the same armed protection. And politicians want to take your guns, but let them get rid of their armed security first. Let's see that happen. Let's see all these left wing politicians who want to confiscate guns. Let's see them get rid of all the armed security around them, but they won't do it. They won't do it. We have you and I, if we choose to do it in this nation, we have the same right to armed security, and I'm good. I'm really good.
Yeah.
And I have that same right to that, and my family has that same right that the president does.
Hmm.
But the point is that we've chosen to be the sheepdog, and they look at you not so much. You might be a hunter, you might be a martial arts expert, you
Hmm.
might be in a variety of different manifestations of the sheepdog, and they would feel the same way.
Yeah.
But the veteran, I don't think it's so much that they think you're going to go postal, although that can be part of the
Hmm.
equation. It's just that they know, when the flock is grazing in the meadow and the sheepdog's having a bad day, they're all kind of watching.
Okay. If you don't mind, some of my listeners are spouses or not
Yeah,
affiliated. The sheepdog analogy is probably my favorite analogy I've ever read. Could you explain that for someone who hasn't heard it, and also maybe help dispel that negative connotation? Because the young kids with the Oakleys and tactical pants, they sheepdog shirts, like they've watered down what it means and taken away the essence. But if you could explain for the listeners the
sure.
sheepdog, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, and really what I just talked about, the hunter and the hunted is another useful insight into the
Hmm.
sheepdog. But really, the world divides into um, the sheep who are just decent, productive members of society who have very limited capacity to protect themselves. They don't have the tools, they don't have the skills. And then there's the wolf who will feed on the sheep without mercy. And they really are. Those are the sociopaths, the psychopaths, and they will feed without mercy. And then there's the sheepdog. And the sheepdog has made the decision to protect the flock. The sheepdog has made the decision to stand up to the wolf. The sheepdog is the one as a kid who stood up to the bully, and the one who tried to confront the bully and the one who tried to protect the weak. When I was a kid, we moved around a lot and I got in fights a lot.
Hmm.
My dad taught me to box early and I got into the martial arts very early. And I was confronting bullies, and not just the bullies who would bully me, but they would bully other people. I said, "No, don't do that." And they said, "Well, what's it got to do with you?" I said, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I don't want you to do that. I'm not going to let you do that to him." And that was about just being the sheepdog at a young age. And no one and the bully is really following the path of the wolf.
Hmm.
They're the oppressor. They're the ones that will hurt people. And why do you have to be a bully? Why do you even have to do this? What's in your mind? But it goes back. I was not as good a brother as I could have been to my little brothers. I wasn't a bully, but I was the alpha. And instead of using that to be more of a helper to them, and nobody told me there should be a covenant. That's our new book, Bulletproof Family. I mean, we can always do a better job. But I followed the sheepdog path from the very beginning. I tried to as best I could. And I think with our new book, this Bulletproof Family, we can help people do an even better job of following the sheepdog path from their youngest days and beginning with protecting your loved ones and protecting your family. But that idea of being the sheepdog or being the protector, and it's a matter of degrees,
Mm.
the woman that carries pepper spray in her purse, the one that goes to self-defense classes, the guy that sits at the table and somebody's got their back to the wall, it's gonna be you, you know, and then it can go on up, if concealed carry is legal and if you're led that way, then you carry, not because it's cool, that's the whole
Right.
Oakley's thing. What if you're truly dedicated, you load a stealth lifestyle.
Right.
You're not out there looking for trouble. You're trying to avoid it. The first step is to avoid it. And so you're not out there, looking for trouble with the tactical pants and the Oakleys and all the other stuff. You're trying to lead that stealth lifestyle. You're trying to protect yourself and your family. And your first level of protection is camouflage. I mean, look at the tiger, look at the leopard, look at the
Right.
lion. They're all camouflaged. The very essence of who they are and what they do is to stay out of sight until it comes time to take decisive action.
Hmm.
They're all about being camouflaged to stay out of sight. And so we're the same way. The wolf, the predator, they will be hidden until their moment comes,
Yeah.
and we're the same way. we blend in, uh, but be the sheepdog. Make that decision to take charge of your life. Little incremental steps of things that you can do to take charge of your life and to be better prepared.
I love that. Dakota Meyer has a weekly newsletter he put out, and he said for the first time since he got his Congressional Medal of Honor and has been a civilian, he just reenlisted in the Marines, but it's the first time he's carried every day in a long time because the world has gotten that wonky. I love the tigers because people see orange and black, but they forget animals don't have the same color that we have. We see in color, they see in a different palette. So the stripes blend in. It looks like natural vegetation.
Yes.
Yeah.
The leopard
Um,
spots are perfect camouflage, and the tawny color of the lion, and of course the wolf. The colors of the wolf, and most dogs,
mhm.
are designed to blend in. Yeah.
And I love how you said the first thing is camouflage and avoidance. Jocko Willink, who is just an absolute monster and lethal as all get out, he talks about it all the time. Don't put yourself in a situation. If you are in a situation, the first thing he's going to do, and this is a Navy SEAL who led the Ramadi, he's black belt many times over. He said, I'm running. Like there has to be something wrong with the machismo brain where we think we have to fight
Well,
when the
yeah.
natural instinct should be to survive.
My wife is disabled, and I'm a 69-year-old, 30% disabled veteran, so I have limited obligation to leave.
Hmm.
If I can get out, I will get out and tell my wife, just get out the back door if I'm not home. She said. But uh, if they come in here, they've kind of made a mistake because I can't leave her. I doesn't have the option to run, and so you've trapped me. And my only option is going to be to fight, and it's not good for the person who comes in that door.
No, it's not. No.
I would joyfully, willingly get on out, but it's not an option for my wife, and so, uh, the only option is it is and some the point is that your tactical situation determines to what degree
Hmm.
we just don't go to that part of town. We don't go to those places. We don't willingly place yourself. John Farnham is one of the great minds of our time, and he's got a weekly newsletter as well, and he's constantly talking about leading the stealth lifestyle
Mm.
and avoiding those circumstances that will get you and that will get you killed. He had a thing recently about just a city employee who was knocked down and kicked to death, just kicked to death. He said, "Beware the shod foot. One of the most deadly things on the planet is just being kicked to death."
Mhm.
You curl up in a ball. "Oh, yeah, yeah, don't fight him, just curl up in a ball." Yeah, well, yeah, how'd that work out for this guy?
Right.
So maybe not go there,
Yeah.
or go with other people, or have some law enforcement support with you when you go there. That kind of thing.
What happens to the body and the brain if you're in a situation like that under extreme stress?
Well, a lot of the training kicks out. One of the great minds of our time is Tony Blauer, and his martial arts is all about the flinch response. And that instinctive flinch response, and he talks about, when you get punched in the face, famous boxer said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the nose."
Absolutely.
And it's true. It's true. When the brain slams back and forth, again, I grew up boxing and taking a blow and being able to keep going. Most people don't have that, and especially when you're caught by surprise, when you're sucker punched. Um, but what happens is a sympathetic nervous system arousal kicks in. And this is the key thing, fight or flight responses. And the thing to understand is people pay big money for that.
Mhm.
Roller coasters, bungee jumping, parachuting, it's scary movies, action movies. People pay big money for that sympathetic nervous system arousal. The only thing is, it's happening at a time when you didn't choose it, but don't fear it. And I think that's part of being a paratrooper. I'm so glad you shared being a paratrooper. For those that never really done it, then maybe those have been to airborne school, and that's good. You've got your
Mhm.
5 jumps, you understand it. But when it's a part of life and you're surrounded by people who do it, one of the most insane things on the planet is a night jump and a plane full of people who hurl themselves into the darkness. I think that's what it's going to be like to die. I think that's going to be the final adventure. And the drop zone is going to be amazing. But first off, you got to have your chute, and
Mm,
you don't go till the jump master says so, right? But but this plane load of idiots who hurl themselves into the darkness, and there's fear there. I mean, there's
mm,
this gut-wrenching, gut-churning fear and excitement. You turn the fear into excitement. You're taught to go towards what you fear. You're taught to challenge what frightens you. You're taught there's no other option but to do that which frightens you. And that's why historically, all of our special ops, every one of them is first and foremost airborne. First thing you do is send them to airborne school because it's a baseline foundation of eliteness. All of our elites, the SEALs, the Green Beret, the Rangers, the baseline for all of them is they're airborne, and that's really the baseline of facing your fear and overcoming that fear. And so that's what makes airborne so good is just uh, to seek out that fear and to find the things that frighten you and to go towards those things. And again, we're not looking for a fight. We're not out there looking for somebody, but when that sympathetic nervous system
mhm.
arousal happens, that was the initial question. What's it feel like? It feels very, very much like what happens when you jump out of a plane.
I love that. And you dirty, nasty legs, we are saying we're better than you. I'm just kidding. um, I'm a big baseball guy, and there's a photographer on social media who he takes pictures of guys rounding third base, heading to their teammates, and he says, "That's what I imagine heaven looks like." And I've loved that. But now with yours, I love it because you don't go till the jump master says you're ready, and then you don't go without your parachute. So I'm jumping into heaven, and Jesus is my parachute. I love that. I think I've just changed my
Oh, and
mental image.
heaven's a drop zone, but
Right.
you never go out that door without fear. Will my chute work this time? Is it gonna work? This bizarre phenomenon of spitting in the face of gravity. You're just. I mean, every child. One of the first things, one of the first survival mechanisms every child has is fear of heights.
Mhm.
And here we are confronting the most basic and fundamental of all survival lessons. Don't jump from high heights. Here we are just spitting in the face of gravity. And so there's this fear. I don't think anybody dies and is absolutely 100% certain. I think we're certain as anybody can be. And here's why. Jesus really did die on the cross. He really
Mhm.
did come back from the grave. And doubting Thomas really did touch the wound in his side. And here's how we know. Because 11 of the 12 disciples were martyred for their
Yep.
faith, and men don't die for a lie.
Exactly.
Here's the key. The disciples of the disciples died. And that's straight up Roman history. Nobody can deny it.
Mhm.
Boom. That's total, straight up, irrefutable Roman history. That the disciples died. They didn't have to die. Well, they had to say, "It's okay, we made it up." But they
Right.
said, "No, no, they didn't wanna die." They said, "No, no, it really did happen. Jesus really did come to the grave." And they said, "Look, we're gonna kill you, but all you gotta do is just say it's not true, and you can live." They wouldn't do it because it was real.
Right.
And that should give you goosebumps because it really did happen. And so that's how we can have confidence. That's how we can go to our death with a high degree of confidence. But nobody, I think, is at 100% certain. It's going to be like going out that plane. That
Mhm.
every other jump it was successful, but I know a guy who crashed and burned. I know a guy who had a bad landing. I know a guy who was a hung jumper. We
Mm.
actually had one of those in our unit.
Oh,
It
wow.
it was a hung jumper. It was pounded against the plane.
No.
We know some bad ones. We know some
Yeah.
guys that had bad ones, and that might be me this time. So I think that element of uncertainty, the element of fear, the guy running into first base, well, okay, he's on the drop zone,
Mhm.
but the guy going out the plane, he's the one dying.
Right.
That's what it's gonna be like. It's going out that plane on a night jump. into the unknown. And it's the greatest adventure of all time, and we can look at it in the same way with the same thrill and that same excitement, but recognizing there's gonna be that same little degree of uncertainty and fear, and that's okay. And the man said, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." And so there's great power in just saying, "God, give me more faith. Uh,
Hmm.
Help me through this." So I've got my gravestone already made. It was my 50th
Love
wedding
that.
anniversary gift. And the gravestone is a bench. I've always liked a bench. Now, the first thing as Christians is we should offer hospitality. That's agape. The agape was the idea of a love feast, the idea of giving food with no expectations of return. And then Jesus used that very word to apply to his sacrificial love of giving himself with no expectations. It costs you nothing. I ask nothing of you except to accept me and accept the meal that I set before you. This is my body broken for you. This is my blood spilled for you. And so I've always liked a bench. A bench says you're welcome. My gravestone is a bench, right? And the tablet across the top, the very first thing says, "Have a seat, weary traveler." And there's an asterisk. And then down on the front lip of the bench, it says, "Yes, this is an engraved invitation." And so my gravestone is a joke. It's got a pun in it. It's a dad joke. My
I
gravestone
love
is
it.
just a big dad joke. This is an engraved
Engraved. Yeah.
invitation. And so I'm taking my death and making it. And then we got John 3:16. Most people at the top of the grave, they got the name. My name's way at the bottom. My wife and our names at the very bottom thing. We got John 3:16 because that's what it's like. We invite you to come and sit. We offer hospitality. We made a joke at our own expense. And then we got, boom, John 3:16. That's what it's all about.
It
And then
is.
we said, "Oh, death, where's that power? Grave, where's that sting?" And then, boom, right down there at the very bottom is my name and my wife's name. And so we're taking our gravestone and number one saying, "I'm confident, death wears that power, grave wears that sting." I'm confident, and taking the opportunity to take your grave, and maybe people will take pictures of humorous gravestones. Here's a guy whose
That'd be
gravestone,
fun.
and what'll be there? That'll be the message. But you just to 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 go into your death knowing that with this high degree of certainty, the most amazing thing in human history. And ultimately the martyrs won.
Hmm.
Ultimately in 313 AD, the Roman Empire essentially became the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, became a Christian empire,
Hmm.
and lasted for another 1,000 years. 1,000-year Christian empire. Most people don't even know that.
Right.
And they hit a point where they said the martyrs won. They said, "Okay, you guys win. We agree. It really did happen." Boom. And the Roman Empire became a Christian empire. The Eastern Roman Empire embraced Christianity and thrived for another 1,000 years. So that brings us back around to that confidence. We
Absolutely.
uh,
One of the last exercises I put in my book is a eulogy writing exercise. My pastor and life coach had me do it, and I thought it was something important to do in the book because a lot of us live day to day, and we don't map out how we should live day to day.
yeah.
And I love the idea of your gravestone. I've pictured mine, but now I might steal that. You might have to copyright that
Go
because
with
that's
it.
phenomenal,
Wouldn't that be fun? Go with it. Yeah.
right?
Uh,
Um, your work eventually moved from the body and the mind and psychology to the soul. Why was that shift necessary?
yeah. I've always felt this burden, this obligation since I became a Christian. My books came out. I'm a man of faith, and I felt like I needed to give it to God. Like all the stuff we had, you know. There's golly, I think it's I think maybe it's Psalms 115, and it says, "Not unto us, O God, not unto us, but unto you be the glory." It begins with that, and at the end of my bio, I put that verse, just Psalm 115 verse 1. I should have that committed to memory, but anyway, it's right. It's one of those right in there. Not in us, Lord, and unto us, but in you be the glory. And I've always felt like it's just it meant nothing. It was wood, hay, and stubble unless I took everything that I'd done so far and turned around and pointed it all towards God and towards it. So everything's focused on surviving physically. But in the end, if you don't survive spiritually, it's nothing. It's nothing. It's just, and that's the big picture. One of the things I tell my classes, people say, well, how could a loving God allow these terrible things to happen? And the thing to realize is your loving God would not make you his puppet. We've all heard if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it's truly yours. That's how much God loves us. He loves us enough to let us make our own decisions. That means a lot of people make really bad decisions and a lot of really bad things happen. And you say, God, why don't you do something? He said, I did. I sent you. But here's the key. If you wrap your mind around the incomprehensible immensity of eternity, if you just try to wrap your mind around eternity, then you realize that one life in infinity is infinitely more important than all the suffering of every human being on this world put together. One person in infinity is infinitely more than all the suffering of this world put together. So the thing to pray for is not a little less suffering. The thing to pray for is not a few more years on this weary earth. The thing to pray for and work for and strive for is that they will come to the knowledge of salvation in eternity in heaven. And that's God's greatest gift.
Absolutely.
And, we look at the little ones. This is hard now. This is the hardest part of all. We look at the little ones whose life was snuffed out. But I think we understand as Christians, not everybody's going to heaven,
Hmm.
but every one of those little children goes straight to Jesus. Every single one of them. And that's the greatest gift of all. And so if we can just take a minute and zoom out and look at that big picture of infinity and knowing that what we think is important in this world is really not. Nothing in this world is important unless it points to infinity and eternity and back to God. And that's where I felt. And I'm so glad you say in your book, you had your eulogy. That was my gravestone was,
Yeah.
this is my eulogy. This is what I want carved in stone. 1,000 years from now, maybe somebody will read and still know about this guy and what's the message we can communicate. On the backside, I've got a quote of mine. Jesus said, greater love is no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. But I added to that, I said, there are many ways to lay down your life.
Yes.
There are many ways to lay down your life. And nobody's ever said this. I Googled this every which way. You can make just about any word salad and find somebody has said it, but nobody's ever said this. It's on the backside of my grave, down low. It says, sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice.
I like
Sometimes the
that.
greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. And that's our mission. That's our
Absolutely.
mission, every one of us. And so that was me just taking it all and pointing it back towards God. Yeah.
I love that. Um, that's something my wife and I are really coming to terms with. I was able to start a foundation. We're trying to do scholarships for a battle buddy who was killed in Iraq. He wanted to be a cop, so um, trying to start a scholarship for veterans who want to pursue law enforcement, so we can pay for the academy. Trying to do homeless initiatives for
Oh,
back home in Detroit. Just really trying to serve. And I love that you said we're not. God's not using us as puppets. Like we're not a character on His PS5 in heaven.
yes.
He set
Yes.
us free.
Yes.
We
Yes.
have the illusion of free will, and I just love that because I think a lot of people maybe think we are just a character and it was all preordained, and really,
Certainly agree it is. I mean, that's another hard thing to wrap your mind around.
hmm
God lives outside of space and time.
hmm
C.S. Lewis said that, and beyond a doubt. So he knows what's going to happen, what has happened, what will happen, what is going to happen. So he knows it, and he allows it, but it's not preordained.
right,
It's up to us to make our decisions, even though God knows it's going to happen. It happens because he let us make that decision. And yeah, you're right. It may be preordained in that he knows it's going to happen, and it's his will, but he allowed it to happen. And that's how could God allow these terrible things to happen? Well, he lets people make their own decision. There's only one way to make that make sense. And in so many ways, God does intercede. He does answer prayer, but in so many ways, God has no hands on this world but ours. He has no mechanism to influence events on this world but us. When he answers prayer, when he when he blesses us, he usually does it through people or through critters.
Hmm.
As how often are we blessed by various like hawks or symbols or signs or dogs but in general he has no hands but ours, and we're the instrument that he's using to bless other people. So our goal is just bless as many people as we can, as long and hard as we can.
Absolutely. The book on spiritual combat. Can you explain for listeners what that is, and then
Sure.
how are warriors and leaders ignoring it at their own risk?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. On combat is about the nuts and bolts of what's going to happen to your mind and body. But I wanted to take it the next level and talk about what happens at the spiritual level, because we got to win the battle physically. I mean, that's part of the equation, is winning that physical battle. But then we've got to win it spiritually. And actually, as you read on spiritual combat stands on its own, no problem. But you can read it, and there's recommended reading at every level from
Hmm.
on combat.
Yep.
So here's the
And the
physical
Bible.
side of the
Yeah.
equation. Here's how it becomes the spiritual side of the equation. But it really is basic training. It starts with equipment issue. What do you do in basic training? The duffel bag drag, right? You go in and you get all this equipment, and it talks about, the belt of truth. The very first thing you put on is the truth, and then your feet shod with the readiness of the gospel, and then boom, we've got and of course the helmet of salvation, the sword of the spirit. But the final piece of equipment is the radio. You go through Ephesians chapter 6, and the
Hmm.
final item is the sword. But then it says, pray ceaselessly in the spirit.
Yep.
And that's our radio. That's our comms. And in the end, you're an MP standing at a road junction somewhere. I'm an infantry soldier staggering through the jungle. Our real power is in that radio.
Yeah.
Our real power is reaching on that radio, calling in an airstrike, calling in artillery, calling in reinforcements, informing others. I mean, that radio, the greatest tool of spiritual warfare is prayer. And so we should be using that prayer constantly. And so that's equipment issue, and then it becomes our SOPs and what's our mission. And we got to understand what's our mission statement. And Jesus said that our mission is to love God and love people. He said, "There's the commandments, in right there. Just there's the 10 Commandments: love God with all your heart and all your might, and love others as yourself." That's a great commandment. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Jesus told us that. And then he said, "A new commandment I give you," almost like that we've replaced the commandments, and not totally, but a new commandment I give you, to love one another as I have loved you. So our mission is to love God and love people. And if we truly love them, then we'll bring them to the knowledge of salvation, the greatest gift of eternity. If we truly love God, we'll do what he says. And he tells us to tell people of the good news of the gospel, to spread the good news, and to tell them. And and we do that by doing good deeds.
Hmm.
And that's really my verse for spiritual warfare is Galatians 6:9.
Mm.
It's my life verse. Grow ye not weary of doing good. In the fullness of time, you reap your reward. So just don't get tired of doing good. Do the right thing every day. Try to do good every day. Make everybody smile. Make every person you touch a chance to make the world a little bit better place. And I do that. I smile. I say, "Hi, how's your day going?" I've got my Charlie, my little service dog,
Yeah.
tucked in him, and he makes everybody smile, and we talk to everybody, and everybody knows me, and we try to make everybody smile. And so do good and grow. You're not weary of doing good. Take every opportunity to just spread a little joy, and then finally is to give God the glory. If we seek the glory for ourselves, it'll always be hollow. But if you give God the glory, then He gives us love and joy and peace and all the things that come with that. So that's the equation, right? To love God and love people. And if we love them, then we'll bring them to the knowledge of salvation. And the best way to do that is just live a life of joy and to be a person people want to know more about,
Hmm.
and to be as good a human being as you can possibly be. And in recent years, I've gotten quite a bit better at that. I've gotten better at making people smile, at looking at everybody, trying to be positive to everybody, but then do good deeds and then give the honor and glory to God, and then reap that love and that joy and that peace and live that full, rich life that your Father wants you to have. And so that's the mission statement, and then we followed through with a lot of nuts and bolts on how to go about that. And then the sequel to that book is we got on spiritual combat, and then we got on spiritual warfare,
Mm,
which really takes it boom the next step, and it's 22 warning orders. It's historically a warning and an order, going back over 500 years. It was a book that was the bestseller. It was the bestseller of its age with uh, 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 22 orders to be virtuous in a violent world.
mm.
And we turned those into 22 warning orders, so the follow-on book on spiritual warfare. So it's a lot of fun just to finally taking it all, and God's given me the time to give it to the Lord, and I pray that He'll give me another 20 years to keep fighting the good fight, because it's just so stinking much fun, and it's
Right.
so joyful.
Me too, because I started reading your stuff in the late 2000s. I followed it. I followed you. I admire you and your work. Um, and I'm disappointed the conversation's coming to an end, but um, I do want to ask one more question, and
Shoot,
it's my
yeah.
legacy question. I like to ask everybody this: when your time on Earth is done and people speak about you, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, first and foremost is to bring them to the knowledge of salvation. And that's I mean, my gravestone, John 3:16, right at the top. For a joke. You're welcome here. Have a seat, weary strangers. Yeah, this is an engraved invitation. But then, with that aside, the and that overarches everything. But I would like people to have a passion to really know that the final frontier of what's actually happening inside the mind and body of a frightened human being. And the most frightening of all possible events is another human being attacking you. Now, it happens to kids who are being bullied and assaulted. It happens to spouses who are being abused. It happens to cops on a daily basis as they face deadly force incidents. It happens to soldiers in combat. This realm of interpersonal human aggression. I wrote the book on killing it, on combat, and on hunting, and on spiritual combat. I hope that my legacy will be this hunger for people to know more and understand more about this final frontier, this desperately, vitally important realm of human aggression and violence, and how we play into it, and how we can work together to maybe make the world a little bit better place.
I love that. And I said I'm a baseball guy. We're batting 1,000. No guest has come on here and talked about leaving a legacy of money or titles or any of the other things we associate that are important in our day to day lives. It's about making a difference in the life of others. And Dave, sir, especially, thank you for your military service, your dedicated service to understanding these complex issues that we face as humans, and being just such a champion of veterans and of our faith in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I thank you for being on the show. It's been an honor and a privilege.
My pleasure, brother. And one kind of note, if I can,
Yes, sir.
I'm a huge science geek, and there was a recent article they studied about people who excelled in life. And they found out that we've been reading it all wrong. All the research was about these the ones early in life that were successful. When they started looking at the ones who were successful late in life, the ones who really left a legacy, what they found out was the ones who blossomed young almost never made that long-term contribution.
Wow.
It's the ones who blossomed slowly. People don't realize, but lieutenant colonel is just lowly officer rank in the big picture, staff sergeant, but
Hmm.
what people don't realize is that we make our mark after we're gone,
Mm,
after we've left. They crashed and burned. They did their rank, and they're gone. Good for them. They served, and God bless them. But, um, you and I, oh, your book, I'm excited about your book. I'm excited to
thank you.
read it. You and I, we made our mark afterwards. And that's really what the research is telling us where greatness lies is not some explosion of rank and achievement at a young age, because those people, they don't make the long-term contribution. It's a steady exponential growth and building over time that allows you to leave that legacy, that major legacy. And you're on your way there, buddy. You're
Oh,
doing
thank
it.
you.
You're doing it. You're doing great things. You got a book bubbling. You've got a faith foundation. You got these podcasts. And again, even if this is all we've done,
Right.
well, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
We've been blessed. But I think great things are coming for you, brother. And you're young, and the world is your oyster. It's in front of you. You're laying a great foundation. And I am so honored and pleased to be a part of the process with you. And I
Thank
pray
you
that
so
God will
much.
keep his hand upon you and upon your endeavors and your family and your book. In the holy name of Jesus, I pray these things over you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
God bless you, buddy. God bless
Bless
America.
you. Yo, what a way to kick off the new year, right? Colonel Grossman, I want to thank you not just for joining me today, but for your willingness throughout your career to speak honestly about things many people would rather avoid. A major theme of this conversation was post traumatic growth, the idea that while trauma and violence leave real marks, they don't have to define the rest of our lives. That growth only becomes possible when we're willing to have the tough conversations and confront uncomfortable truths. You've never shied away from discussing taboo subjects like violence, killing, and their psychological and moral effects, not to glorify them, but to help warriors, first responders, and leaders understand what those experiences do to us and how to live rightly in the aftermath. That honesty matters because avoiding these conversations doesn't protect people, it isolates them. And facing them with discipline, responsibility, and faith is often the first step toward real healing and growth. I also want to say how much I appreciated your openness about your Christian faith, your willingness to speak about faith, morality, and responsibility as integral parts of healing and growth adds depth and clarity to a conversation that's often stripped of meaning. Dave, it was a true honor. Thank you for your service, your scholarship, and your continued leadership. To our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that growth is possible after trauma, and the hard conversations, grounded in truth and purpose, are often the most important ones. If you're struggling, please remember the world is better with you in it. If you're struggling or know someone who is, please seek help. Call 988, call a true friend or battle buddy, someone who is a fountain, not a drain. If this episode resonated with you, please give us a like, share, a follow on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, and threads at enduring underscore mindset underscore enterprise. Check out the website, www.enduringmindsetenterprise.com. Info about my forthcoming book is on there, as is our newly IRS approved nonprofit arm, the Enduring Mindset Foundation, a 501c3 foundation we plan to use to champion even more veteran initiatives. Thank you for listening. Until next time, onward, forward, fall out.